This is Pop. Star Trek original series rewatch this week is Errand of Mercy. That's right. I am a noob. I don't do Trek. And here I am with Nerdporial's guidance going down, and we have Klingons. Thank goodness. Let's talk about it right now. All right, I am Pops. Yes, going through Trek. That's right. Original series stuff with Nerdporial Lifeforms guidance. We're going through Errand of Mercy this week. That's right, Klingons. That's right. The show starts off with a pretty quick little action sequence. I was totally thrilled that we get our hey, negotiations are breaking down, Spock. Things are getting tense. What's the deal? What's the thoughts? And then suddenly they're under attack. Return fire. We have lasers. We have blasts. We have things going on. I love these shots, by the way. This is the famous shaky studio cam movement that was mocked pretty well during SNL, but I love it. I got to see my bird of prey, get to see some stuff going on here. This was the Trek that I love so much. Starships battling, tension, chaos, not quite sure what's going on. I loved how this episode opened. All right, Sulu's left in charge, and they're going to beam down. And actually, it was just interesting that Spock and Kirk are the only ones that beam down, giving Sulu instructions to just leave them if things go awry. They run into this guy who basically is in charge of this extremely, I don't know, what's the appropriate word? They don't have technology. They appear to be like pacifists. They appear to be sort of like non-violent in every possible way. And everything in this episode that Kirk does to try to warn them falls on deaf ears. They have all these meetings, have these different conversations about what lies ahead, and they're just like, well, we're just really not interested in helping you. Spock doesn't even know what to make of it either. They're like, they just completely have these like very strange grins on their faces the whole time. I didn't even know how to think. I didn't remember this at all. I didn't remember any of this episode really much at all. And I really didn't know how to kind of play up the situation when the Klingons arrive. So they have Kirk and Spock there, sort of like in quote disguise under their protection as Core. He's the Klingon commander, comes into play. Didn't know much about the Core actor. Briefly, I didn't have time to really. I don't really do any research. Don't do any dive deep stuff, folks. So please feel free to add your comments accordingly. All those wonderful things that I missed. I did notice the actor's name, so therefore I was able to connect the dots to Battlestar Galactica, which I'm a fan of as well. And of course, he plays Baltar over there. I don't know that I have a great affinity for this version of Klingon where we have sort of just makeup. We have just hair, makeup, the proto Klingon. So you guys have to kind of tell me, like, how does this evolve over time with what the Klingons' looks are? Is it a difference of breeds or races or something within Klingon, or is it just the fact that the show, for budget and technology sakes, just didn't do a lot, and then later on they kind of expanded this and changed it radically? You feel free to let me know there. I also noticed that Gene Kuhn wrote this up, and he was the script writer, so we got to see a lot more of the Trek that I enjoy with the bantering and the wit. I feel like we actually get a Kirk and a Spock that I can identify more, whereas there's been a lot of episodes where I didn't feel like I was connected as much as the stuff that I was used to, which again is almost exclusively in film. I grew up watching original series with mom, but to be honest, I was young and just a lot of this stuff just didn't sink in. I've watched pieces of things over the years, but this wouldn't have been one that kind of came to light. So we jump ahead a little bit, and basically the two of them kind of play like terrorist mode here and just try to sabotage everything. I was a little surprised by that, and real surprised by Kirk's reaction to everything and how little interest he has in giving the Klingons sort of any wiggle room. Now, I think what I mean by that is there's clearly a long history with the Klingons that has not been part of the show yet. So, as someone who's coming in, there's really not a lot of discussion or backstory of going, or even allusions to a previous war or previous battle or previous loss of life. They are just described as being very animalistic and dictators and authoritarian violence. And then the violence that takes place in the show happens off camera. So we see, oh, we just eliminated 200 people, and you get this sort of like blank stare again. We have no real reaction, and you just have them sort of reveling in the violence and reveling in to be able to have a chance to kill Kirk and Spock, basically. And this all is very dialogue driven for the most part. They're kind of trapped. They don't know what to do. before we get visited again and sort of freed from the jail so they're allowed to kind of create more chaos and figure out a strategy on how to plead with the council, come up with some sort of way of doing something that can save life. And then they ultimately turn inward with this weird thing. Now, at this point, I have to be honest, I did not know what to expect. I was like, what is going on? I feel like I'm having some sort of weird Buddha metaphor. It was kind of a little bit of what they're going for, this sort of pacifist stuff. But in reality, the Organians were something completely different. And I did not see this coming. So at the end, whenever this is all transpiring, it's sort of going to get violent and spaceships and everything's going to go. Suddenly there's a blackout because the Organians are actually super beings. And they're basically, this is where we get the famous Spock line, pure energy. I have to be honest, I like that part. Pure energy. So Information Society has their lift. That's fantastic. I love that. Thought that was great. I'm glad to see that kind of manifest. Yeah, Spock's great in this episode. Kirk's great in this episode. I think it is interesting to see the epilogue of like sad Kirk. Sad Kirk didn't get his war. There is a quick line about being more like a soldier and not an ambassador kind of stuff, which is definitely the Kirk mantra for this. But it was a little weird trying to see Kirk kind of like reined in a little bit. Like he doesn't kind of get the violence and the battles and the war, all things that he kind of thirsts for against the Klingon. And again, that makes sense only if it's revenge and only if we had better setup to know what that was in framework for. And I feel like it's very hard to put all of Trek back in the bottle and take this very objectively. Taking it for, 20 something episodes to this point, we're framing it. We have these monsters coming to town, but we don't know why. We're never really told why. Yeah, okay. So again, I'm trying to be objective. I get the Klingon stuff within scope of other shows and movies, but for this, and I found a little bit of this to kind of be a little unnerving because it didn't really paint Kirk in the best of lights, kind of paint him as like bloodthirsty and a warmonger and wanting violence for the sake of violence because we don't have a lot of layered context. We see a little bit of that with the Klingons. They just outright just violate people's rights and murder people, but it's all off camera. We don't have any sort of like things that we can kind of visually see and get our head around what's actually happening. So don't feel like the impact was there for that either. All in all, though, I got a lot of positives in this episode. I got some good stuff. Don't know that I consider this top tier, but it was actually nice. It was good. It was good setup stuff. So I think that I would have enjoyed it a little more if we had a little more background, maybe in some of those conversations on the bridge, instead of jumping right to that battle, is cutting to like Spock catching Kirk up on some different things or vice versa or something. I don't know, some context. And then later having less conversation and delay with the Organians who were just pacifists. And that was just kind of tedious. It kind of drug out a little bit longer than it needed to. But I feel like, again, we're building the show as we go, trying to give the show as much leeway and permission as I can, but also trying to be objective with how I felt watching it. So that's my take. Love to hear from you guys. I am Pops.